Greetings fellow humans, my name is Alistair Lord and I am the Renaissance Yorkshireman. Today I'd like to speak to you about my experience of having COVID and recovering from COVID. So I came down with COVID on, I first had symptoms on the first Tuesday of July. It was the 6th of July. When I woke up on Wednesday morning of the 7th, I was pretty certain I had COVID. My daughter had already tested positive for COVID on Saturday the 3rd of July. So she was self-isolating in the house. I was looking after her. I went for a test on the Sunday. It came back negative, and I felt fine on that Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It was only the Tuesday evening I started feeling symptoms, and on the Wednesday morning I felt pretty awful. How I'm structuring this video is that first I'm going to tell you about my reasons for not getting the COVID vaccine. Secondly, I'm just going to give you an overview of the 3 weeks that I had COVID and the 5 weeks since then, which have essentially been me recovering fully from COVID. And then I'll talk a little bit about what my actual symptoms were and how I felt when I had COVID. So there are three main reasons why I have decided not to have the COVID vaccine. The first reason is that there simply is no long-term safety data on these vaccines for COVID. Anyone who claims that they are safe in the long term, scientists or non-scientists, if they're claiming that they're safe in the long term, that is pure speculation. There simply is no data for their long-term safety. Therefore, there is no evidence that they are safe in the long term or that they're not safe in the long term. I mean, it is possible that they are completely safe in the long term, but the data does not exist. So I believe that that is a good enough reason to decide not to take this vaccine. The second reason is that COVID simply is not that dangerous for most people. Less than 1% of people who get COVID die. And the majority of those people are either over 70 years old and or they have underlying health conditions. COVID is not Ebola and it's not AIDS. For most people, it's a bad flu. So it's simply not that bad a virus. And the third reason is that I made the decision that I thought that I had a robust immune system and that if I got COVID, I would take my chances. And I think as an emotionally mature and well-informed adult, that is my decision to make. And I made that decision, and then later I got COVID and I recovered from it. And just in case anyone's watching this video going, he's an anti-vaxxer, he's an anti-vaxxer. In April this year, I went to the doctor and I had a vaccine for hepatitis A and I had a vaccine for tetanus. The reason I got the tetanus and the Hep A vaccine was that I thought that I would be travelling to Thailand later this year. Now, as it happens, my plans have changed and I am no longer travelling to Thailand this year. But I was happy to take a tetanus vaccine and to take a Hep A vaccine because long-term data of their safety exists. And I made the risk analysis and the cost-benefit analysis in my own mind, in my own way, that having these vaccines was a better idea for me than not having those vaccines. So my overview of my COVID experience. So it started in the beginning of July. Now, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to refer to Thursday the 1st of July, Friday the 2nd, Saturday the 3rd, Sunday the 4th as week 0, right? So my daughter tested positive for COVID in week 0. I tested negative. Week 1 starts Monday the 5th of July. On the Tuesday, I had symptoms. And on the Wednesday, I certainly had COVID. And I felt pretty awful for about 5 days. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I felt awful. And I'll go into more details of this in a few minutes. Week 2 started and I didn't feel as bad on the Monday, but I did develop a really bad cough. So week 2 and week 3, I felt that I was improving, but I wouldn't say it was a linear improvement. It was kind of like one day I'd feel better, the next day I'd feel worse, one day I'd feel better, the next day I'd feel worse. So it was kind of like this, my improvement. It was heading in a linear direction, but not always in a straight line. It was often kind of up and down. But overall, I was recovering. So week 2 and week 3, I didn't have as bad symptoms as I had in week 1, but the cough that I had, that particular symptom was a lot worse because I barely had a cough in the first week, but in the second and third week, it was really bad. So week 4, the last week of July, I felt like I'd pretty much shaken COVID entirely, but I still felt quite weak. And not only had I not been doing my exercise routine for the 3 weeks that I'd had COVID, but actually in the kind of month or 2 before, I'd mostly fallen out of my exercise routine. So I made the decision in week 4, my first week of recovery, that I needed to get back into my exercise routine. So in week 4, I did my kettlebells for the first time in about 4 or 5 weeks. But I dropped down a weight. I'd normally been doing 18 kilogram kettlebell, and with this routine, I dropped down to a 16 kilogram kettlebell. In week 5, which was the first week of August, I did my kettlebells twice, although I stayed at a 16 kilogram kettlebell, and I started a new fasting routine. So I made the decision that for the month of August 2021, I would fast every Wednesday. So every Wednesday I would do a 1-day water fast, so about 40 hours. So I would eat my last meal at about 7 o'clock on a Tuesday. I wouldn't eat all day Wednesday. And then on the Thursday morning, if I was ravenously hungry, I would eat at 9 o'clock. If I didn't feel so hungry, I would leave it till 11 or 1 o'clock, depending. Now, one of the reasons I decided to do a 1-day fast as part of my recovery is for about 1.5 years now, I've been doing at least a 1-day water fast every month, and I think it's benefited my health. And there's plenty of evidence out there that fasting is beneficial for your health. So I thought I need to do something active to properly, fully recover from COVID, and one of those things was fasting. Week 6, I stepped up my exercise routine. I felt stronger by this point. So week 6, I did my kettlebells twice, but I moved back up to 18 kilograms. And I joined my local swimming pool and I went swimming twice. Week 7, again, I did my kettlebells twice, 18 kilograms, and I went swimming twice. And this week, week 8, I've only done my kettlebells once, but I've been swimming 3 times. And I have to say now, I feel fully recovered. I lost about half a stone while I had COVID. I also stopped drinking alcohol the second day I had COVID, so I haven't drunk any alcohol in over 7 weeks. So that's certainly contributed to feeling more healthy and losing weight. So that's the overview of me having COVID and my recovery from COVID. So basically, I think more or less from start to finish, I had COVID about 17 or 18 days, 2.5 weeks. So I started symptoms on the Tuesday evening, and Wednesday I felt awful, and for 5 days I felt awful. So I couldn't sleep for more than about 2.5 hours in one block. I felt weak and lethargic. My nose was running a lot. I was constantly blowing my nose. My appetite completely disappeared. I had to force myself to eat. On day 3 of my COVID experience, I started taking vitamin C with zinc and vitamin D because a friend of mine recommended this to me. Whether it did or didn't help, I don't know. So those were my main symptoms. So I would often go to bed about midnight. I would wake up at 2 or half 2 in the morning. I'd feel really weak. I didn't want to get out of bed because I just couldn't be bothered. I felt so weak. So I would just lie there. Maybe about 3:30 or 4 o'clock, I would be bored. So I would force myself to get out of bed. I'd go downstairs, maybe make myself a cup of tea. And then I would watch some Netflix for 2 or 3 hours. Because, I couldn't sleep and I felt too weak to really do anything. So, I binged watched some series. Normally by about sort of 7, half 6, 7 o'clock, be feeling tired again. So I'd go back to bed. I'd sleep for maybe an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. I'd get up again, watch more rubbish on Netflix, go back to bed again in the afternoon, sleep maybe for an hour, hour or two, and then again I would wake up, but I would just feel so weak that I didn't really want to get out of bed. Now, by the time it sort of rolled around to like 4 or 5 o'clock in the late afternoon, I'd actually started to feel a bit better in these first 5 days. So I'd normally get up, at 4 or 5 o'clock, and I didn't feel as weak in this late afternoon, early evening as I did in the mornings. So those were my main symptoms: poor sleeping patterns, feeling really weak and lethargic, no appetite, runny nose. My cough wasn't that bad this first week. I mean, it was slight, I was coughing a little bit more than normal, but not much. So when I woke up on the Monday morning of week 2, my cough really started. And for about 12 days, I had a really bad cough. The other symptoms did start to improve. So my sleeping got better. I could sleep for now more like 4 or 5 hours at a time. I would still often have a nap in the afternoon and then feel really weak and not be able to get out of bed for about an hour. And again, by about sort of 5 or 6 in the evening, I would feel better. But the symptoms did gradually improve over the space of about 12 days, except for the cough. The cough got really bad. I was having these coughing fits, where for like a minute or sometimes a minute and a half or 2 minutes, I was just coughing and coughing and coughing. And then, I would go and spit loads of phlegm. And I would get quite bad. At one point, I thought I'd pulled a muscle in my back because I was coughing so much. And gradually, after about 2 weeks, I would say the coughing went. So more or less, my symptoms were about 17 or 18 days. The cough may be slightly longer. But after 3 weeks, I pretty much felt like I'd fully recovered. And when I started week 4, I really thought I've shaken this virus and now I need to concentrate on my recovery, which will involve getting back into my exercise routine. So I committed to easing myself into my exercise routine, and I committed myself to a 1-day fast each week for the whole of August. And now that August is almost finished, and I'm getting ready for a different fasting routine in September, I have to say I feel fully recovered from COVID and I feel great. If you have any questions or constructive comments, please feel free to put them in the comments after this video. Thank you for giving me your time today. Peace.